Good morning. My name's Dave, and along with my wife, we're from International Children's Care. Actually, we're from Victoria. Don't hold that against us. And if I look a little bit dreamy-eyed, forgive me, my beautiful wife's in front of me. We've only been married for 3 months. So, thank you. Anyway, this morning I want to share with you something perhaps a little bit different. And it's our privilege to be here this morning to talk about something that, for us, we're very passionate about, and that's help and support that we can give to destitute and abandoned children. So anyway, enough about us, let's get cracking. I'd like to share with you, first of all, some stories. You must first forgive me, I'm not a preacher, I don't do theology very well. I kind of get all tongue-tied after about 3 verses. And you don't mind, do you, if I just tell you some stories this morning? No, great. This little girl here, Champa, actually we changed her name to Angel. This little girl was left abandoned on the side of the road. And not like a freeway road, like a walking track road, you know, just wide enough for a motorbike, because she had a cleft palate. And the part of the world where she is from, cleft palates mean the spirits are against the family. You've got to remove the problem. The problem was the child. Get the child out of the house. In fact, get the child right out of the village and out of the community, and she was left on the side of the road and would have died if it wasn't for a young, vigilant pastor working as a Bible worker in that community. And he found this girl wrapped in a blanket. You know, a year later and a little bit of microsurgery, isn't she just the angel? And these are the stories that I read and the pictures that I see and the people that I meet when I think about International Children's Care. This is what we're doing internationally. We're caring for children, just like Angel. And we started with many years ago, and it was really, I think, the life and soul of people who felt impassioned, kind of that extra little bit of passion and compassion that some people have. You know, you meet them from time to time that want to do something, be those that stand up, to be the world changer type, who started ICC back in the 70s. And it did start in Guatemala, and we have been for almost 40 years a supporting ministry of the Adventist Church, which has been a tremendous blessing to us and to the church, where we work alongside each other in 17 nations around the world today. One of the verses that I often think that, well, I know it was one of the verses that helped shape the identity of ICC in its early days, but it still shapes my day every day. And I want to share it with you because it is one of those beautiful, shapely verses in Scripture. Learn to do good. I struggle with that one just like everybody else. Seek justice. And I don't know what first thing, like, you know, we have mental pictures, right? And we think in colors and pictures. I don't know what picture you just thought of when you read that word justice. But unfortunately, I think of injustice. I see it flipped the other way around, because that tends to what I see when I look at that. What about help the oppressed? What about defend the cause of the orphan? What about fight for the rights of the widow? Some good words in there, isn't there? Let's do some learning, seeking, helping, defending, and fighting. That's like a good Sabbath activity, isn't it? You know, it's the shape that we can be in from verses like this that can set us, or set something in us in motion that can really reach out and help other people. One of the projects that ICC has, I suppose for many years, has prided itself in is its children's villages, a developmental approach to looking after orphaned, abandoned and destitute children in many parts of the world, and kids in great numbers. And we typically start with acreage in the countryside somewhere, a place where there's good water source, availability to grow crops. And in this case, we're looking here at some rice fields and a good little river that runs all year round in the Philippines, where we care for quite a number of destitute and abandoned children. And we have these programs all over the world. We have homes not too dissimilar from our own, just highly likely they've got a few more kids in them. These homes have 15, sometimes 18 children and sometimes 12. Here's a few of the kids. I said I was coming to Springwood. They wanted to say good day, so here they are, just saying hello. You can wave back if you feel the need, and your friends won't think you're mad. But these children all come with stories. They've all been rescued. They have baggage. They have, they have problems. They have issues. They have things that need to be sorted out when they arrive. And they need some extra special love and extra special care. And, you know, one of the ways that we help them is we have a bit of fun with them and help them to relive their childhood. I taught this kid, if you pull your ears, your tongue falls out. Can you kids do that? Maybe some of the oldies can show these kids how to do it. Anyway, you know, they're just children that have largely lost their innocence and their childhood. And it's been painful experiences for them. We have a very good agriculture project, and in our different places where we work, and for those of you a little bit farming minded, these are our two tractors, Massey and Ferguson, and they plough the fields. For those of you who've got no idea what a Massey Ferguson is, it's a tractor, don't worry, and it's red. This is where we start with feeding the hungry and growing good crops. We can grow corn in 8 to 10 weeks, beautiful corn. We bake our own bread. Now, I just need to pause just for a moment because you have to use a little bit of imagination. Imagine it's about this time in the morning, it's 3 hours since breakfast, and, well, in this case, it's 2 hours to lunch because I'm going to be long. No, just kidding. It's nearly lunchtime, and you walk past a bakery, and you know that smell? You know that smell. You weren't hungry, but now you are hungry. You're now starving because that's a nice smell, that bread smell. And so look at the picture. We've just opened the oven door. It's the bread smell. I want to draw your attention to this long loaf in the bottom. That is not just any bread. That's full, inside, stuffed with coconut and chocolate. It's a delicacy. The coconut and chocolate's growing on the property. And we slice it and we put a bit of thick butter on it. Now you're really hungry, aren't you? Well, I brought some to share, but the problem is it's 2,000 kilometers from where I live to here, and I was hungry on the way and I ate it. But don't worry, we're inviting you to come and taste this bread because it is good. We want you to come and work with us and volunteer with us, and we'll talk about that shortly. We make tofu and soy milk, and the kids get involved as well, and they learn practical things that will help them to feed themselves instead of just getting handouts continuously. But there are lives that are really, these kids, they struggle. And this girl here, she's had her struggles. I'm going to be very careful the words that I choose because I know there's children here. So I will say to you that this girl had a very, very terrible experience happened in her life for 8 months, for which she was enslaved and for which she suffered the indignity of, you know what I mean. And yes, it was a man problem. It was a man that was the leader in her community that should have stood up for her rights. She was an orphan child, should have stood up for her needs, but instead he violated and abused this child for 8 months. You know, this girl, even though we backed her through the court process and the perpetrator received a 120-year sentence, she still was full of bitterness, hate and anger, and you can't blame her. But you know, we love this child just as we do all the other kids, and we help this young lady to achieve, helped her with her training programs, helped her with her education. She didn't even start school till she was 12 years old, and we fast-tracked that. We got her a tutor. We did everything we can, but we could not break this anger and this hatred until one day she discovered forgiveness. The day that she discovered that forgiveness would set her free was the day that she climbed the mountain to the top and looked at that beautiful view of Jesus Christ stretched out on that cross, metaphorically. In her mind, she understood what it meant to forgive. Because prior to that, it had been like her drinking poison and hoping he was dying. But it doesn't work like that, as we know. And she forgave and has moved on. And what a joy that young lady has become to work with and have in our programs. James 1:27 talks specifically about girls like this. It says, and you can read it with me, pure and lasting religion in the sight of God our Father means that we must care for orphans and widows in their troubles and refuse to let the world corrupt us. It's for girls like this that verse was written. Pure and lasting religion was just for girls like that. This little boy is in pretty bad shape. He was in pretty bad shape. He was almost dead. 6 weeks later, that's all. 6 weeks later, we see an incredible life transformation. He still has a problem with his eyes, and you can see that. Protein, vitamins, nutritious food, and medicines. 6 weeks later. And we see these transformations daily. And people will say to me, what's so good about your job? Where do I start? Where do I start? This is what we see on a daily basis. Life transformations. But there is a tragedy, a very, very real tragedy that is taking place right here, right now in this world. Today, while we're here, going on 13 million. This is a few months old, this statistic. Almost 13 million children enslaved against their will. And yet children are not for sale. Children are not for sale. We would be horrified. We'd be indignant if someone came to us and said, oh, can I buy your daughter for a week? We'd want to scream, punch, kick, do anything. In fact, that first verse we started with, help me to be good, would not come to mind. I think we'd jump straight to the second one, justice. But unfortunately today, while we're here, children are for sale. Take a moment to consider the cost of inaction. I spoke to your pastor, Pastor Mladen, last week, and he shared that you've been going through Ephesians. And he asked if there was any way that you could have a look at Ephesians chapter 5, 1 to 20, and perhaps pull something out of there that you can share with the congregation. And I read that chapter, and there's some really good stuff, and there's some very punchy stuff, and it's not the first time it's been read. And so I just pulled a few little things out of here. You must live like people who belong to the light. Have nothing to do with the worthless things of no value. The worthless things that people do, things that belong to the darkness. Let me be very frank and candid with you. I mean seriously frank. Children and girls are for sale because of men. Men are the problem. I know I'm a man, I'm part of the problem, I'm a man. Men are the problem. And I'm appealing right now to men. If you think it's disgusting that children and girls are for sale, yet you have a pornography addiction, you are part of the problem. And you need to stand up first to yourself and then in front of Christ and ask for forgiveness and move on. Because men are the problem in this. I'd like to read something with you, very compelling. At 16 years old, Ning Ning was abducted by crime gangs in Angeles City in the Philippines. She shares her story. They put me in a dark room with dozens of other young girls. Everyone was coughing and sick. We were not allowed to talk to the guards or they would beat us. They forced us to serve, and I won't tell you what they did, but we knew this was rape. We were only allowed a few hours sleep each day, and if I was lucky, they fed me some stale rice with water. When I slept, I was chained to a bed so I wouldn't run away. And the story continues right through the degradation of this girl's life, who now at 20 is a serious advocate for women's rights and girls' rights. There is only one thing I believe as bad as the men that drive this are the Christians who weekly sit on their pew and do nothing about it. This is a man problem created by man, and man needs to fix it. And you men, I'm appealing to you to stand up, because it's been a number of years and almost centuries since there were some good men like William Wilberforce that were willing to stand up against this problem. Blessed home is an outcome, a good outcome for some of these girls who have struggled through the indignity and the horrors of being chained and shackled in prostitution against their will. It's girls like this that we work for. It's girls like this that we pray for. And then you can join us every day in prayer for. It's for girls like this that I get really annoyed at when people don't want to help and support. You know, it's this kind of indignant, how can people not look these little children in the eye and say, I'm not prepared to do anything. I can't even be bothered praying for them. Guys, we need your help and we need your support. In one way or another, you can help us. And towards the end, Esther will appeal to you in ways that you can support. Because the Bible is so crystal clear. This message was given to Isaiah centuries ago that is still as foundational as a truth today as it was over 2,000 years ago. Remove the chains of oppression and the yoke of injustice. Does it get clearer than that? For me, it's crystal clear. And let the oppressed go free. Freedom. Imagine freedom for these girls. Imagine if these girls were Christian and what their prayers and their daily pouring out of their heart would be every day to their brothers and sisters around the world to help them and support them. Share your food with the hungry and open your homes to the homeless poor. Give your clothes to those who have nothing to wear, and do not refuse to help your brothers and sisters, my brothers and sisters in the Christian fold across the world. They are our own. Do not refuse to help them. Remove the chains of oppression. This beautiful lady holding the child had 15 children. I interviewed her 6 years ago. She was 36. 10 of her children had died, all poverty-related issues, all of them. Her oldest child, living child, was 14. She was this pregnant with a second and already the firstborn on her arm at 14. Poverty, lack of education, disease had just ravished this family, and she was just the face of others in the community. And I often ask, what can we do to help these women, help these poor people more and more each day? So again, we find in the scripture the answers, because truly there are some great answers there. If there are any poor people in your towns, don't be hard-hearted or tight-fisted towards them. Instead, be generous and lend them whatever they need. Doesn't say give, but to lend. Lend them. Microcredit. Perhaps some of you have heard of microcredit or microfinance, the concept where you make a small loan, $80, $100, $120, to help someone to establish a small business. The business grows, they pay the money back over time. Within 8 or 10 months, the money comes back to the one that has lent it at minimal or no interest rates, and the family or that lady and her family have established a small business and they're doing it for themselves. This lady here, she's standing in front of her little shop, $120 worth of stock in her shop, from daily serves of shampoo to whatever else that you might need on your table that day on the corner store. It's called a sari store in the country where she's from, but that's hers. She's now an empowered businesswoman doing it for herself. This is one of our sisters, Sonia, an Adventist lady from a little island in central Philippines. And her poverty is very noticeable. In fact, if you just draw your attention over here, that is her cooker. It's not one of those lovely big nice ovens that we have in our homes. This is her bed. You can see it's pretty humble. That's a very Spartan house. And on the outside, it doesn't get much better. You know, I've seen kids' cubby houses that may not be as big, but they're more elaborate. And she, in her poverty, had children who were malnourished. So we enrolled the children into a feeding program where those girls had 3 incredibly nutritious meals every week. But Sonia had to do something for it. There was no free handout. There was no free lunch. You know, you've heard that before. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Sonia and the other ladies work in the fields, in the community garden that we provide. They grow the food. They prepare the food. They cook the food for these children, their own children, in their feeding program 3 times a week. And you know, that municipal health nurse that comes and checks those children on a weekly basis, after 3 or 4 months, she gives them the tick. They're no longer malnourished. They're now strong, invigorated, healthy, back into school. And Sonia can now get a micro loan. And today, she's a very happy woman. She still has all the hallmarks of being poor, but she's not so poverty-struck that she can't afford medicine and clean water and access to education for her children and 3 meals a day, because now she's a small businesswoman and she is cutting it with all the others and actually is no longer the despised person in her community. We have helped Sonia to decrease the vulnerability of her children so they won't be the next victims of the man problem and human trafficking in her community. In places where we work, there is often the devastating news, we hear it in Australia, of a typhoon or a cyclone, and that, you know, some of you are now aware that super typhoons that hit the Philippines, of which they have a lot of, by the way, there's more than 20 typhoons a year hit the Philippines. Some of them have got wind speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour. Ordinarily, a super typhoon would be striking the coastline at about 220 kilometers per hour. And how do huts like this stand up to that sort of wind speed and the flooding that comes with it? And we find they're a client base that is so impoverished and so poor. Again, we reach out to them with housing solutions. They all have to come and work for us if they would like a new home. And they come because they want to help their children. They want to decrease that vulnerability. They want to be back in a home. And for 5 days' labor, they can get a housing kit. And that kit is worth $220, and it's got timber, and it's got some roof sheets, and it's got some nails and some tie wire. It's very simple, but they know how to erect a brand new home from those materials, and they can start all over again, helping themselves. And they did it through their own hands and their own labor. No handouts, no dole, no Centrelink, their own labor. This dear old lady here, this old grandma, beautiful lady. You know what a hoe is? You know you can dig the garden with a hoe? She can dig 1/4 of an acre a day, and she's 65 years old. She's strong. She'd beat most of you guys in an arm wrestle. Maybe because you're not real men quite yet, but anyway. And I said to her, I said, do you mind if I take your photograph? And she smiled and kind of, you know, she closed her mouth because she only has one tooth. Anyway, I said, can I put your picture on Facebook? And she said, she thought I said, you have a face like a book. Anyway, but she's a grandma that struggles, and she has children that she looks after. And she came because she believes in the dignity of labor, and she worked for her 5 days for her home kit. And here we are, another one. There was a lady that had no means to come and work because her children were sick and her husband was away and their house had been flattened and she was staying with friends. She said, can I send my buffalo to work? So we took her buffalo, and the buffalo worked for 5 days. I don't think she could have plowed as well as the buffalo anyway. The theme is that people are empowered and their dignity is returned when you help them to help themselves and not help them through welfare. Here we are unloading the timber to these homes, and they were so excited. And this is one of the exciting things about the Icc Volunteering Programme, and those of you who haven't heard about it, you will, because you get a flyer today and you can learn all about it. You can come and help these programs. Help after the devastation of a typhoon or a cyclone or an earthquake. Help with housing projects and solutions. Help with hygiene programs. There's all sorts you can do, but we need your hands and your feet. This is one of the most practical ways that you can engage people for the gospel. Of course, you can use your lips too. You can talk to them. And there is plenty of people you can talk to. And we absolutely accept girls that want to come and work on our building teams. We believe in girl power, don't worry. Most of our client base is girls. We see how those super mums work. And we don't mind if the house is a bit wonky, we'll sort it out. But we need you there, girls. Come and work with us. And honestly, parents, where could you send your teenage daughter to do 1,000 tooth extractions in a week? They can come with us and work with our dentists and our nurses and our doctors, or you can just scare the life out of children like this girl does. We need you to come and volunteer with us and be a part of our programs. And you know, these 3 girls here are from Guam Adventist Academy, and they send a group from their school every year to come and work with us. And this is like snapped the first minute of the first day. Check out the look on this girl's face. Why am I here? Look at this one. That's going to hurt. You know, they're doing delicing. It's not the prettiest job, but believe me, after they'd done 3,000 heads, they'd got the hang of it. And I want to ask you, you can you can wonder, this is delousing going on here under this under the glad wrap, but there's too many of you ask this question and wait for your answer, so I'm going to tell you. That is mayonnaise under that glad wrap. It knocks them flat. So when you have your salad at lunch, mayonnaise, think lice. It's good. The big build. Those of you, some of you may have been on the big build, some of you may have never even heard of the big build, but the big build is open to anybody. And the last one we ran had 180 volunteers. Imagine 180 people in one place in one great big volunteering program in Thailand. What an event. Well, you're welcome to join us again. Make note of those dates, and we've got a flyer you'll get a bit later on. There's a lot of stuff going on. But just before I finish and Esther comes up, I'm going to tell you a story, and I want you to remember this story. So is anyone asleep? Put your hand up if you're asleep. All right, go and wake them up. The lady in yellow, you can see she's distraught. She's distressed. Her name is Som. This story happened in Cambodia. And Som had a bit of a hard time. We'd been running some medical clinics in the community, and she had come along the last day, the last clinic. Afterwards, there's nothing wrong with her children. There's nothing wrong with her. Medically, they're okay. But she came for a very different reason. She came because the heartache that she was going through, she needed someone to look after those children. And so the story unfolded that when the little boy who is standing directly in front of her was still in the womb and she was almost ready to give birth, her drunken husband, then drunken husband, had taken a knife that long, and I'm not going to tell you what she did, what he did, but you can just imagine that he wanted to terminate the pregnancy. And she had taken the weight of that across the arm and left her disfigured, and she borrowed $50 for surgery. She was unable to get the use of her thumb and her fingers and some of the motion of the hand, unable to work properly. The money that she borrowed was to be repaid at 30% interest per month. An impossible task for a woman that didn't even earn $40 a month, with 5 mouths to feed, including now a newborn baby. The debt had risen, and so the loan shark had come for the collateral, the children. In the contract that she had signed as an illiterate, she had no idea that she had just turned over her children to a human trafficker. Those kids were going to be his, and they were going to be enslaved. She had begged and pleaded with the traffickers that she go instead of the children, and the children be left free. She brought those children to our program that night because she was going to Malaysia that night to work as a prostitute to pay back the debt, and she was begging us to take our children. There was a gentleman there that day, on hearing this story, made a profound decision. He pulled out his wallet and he bought her freedom right there on the spot. It's a great story, but it doesn't end there. You see, there is this incredible parallel between what Jesus did on the cross for us and the freedom that he offers us spiritually, which sometimes leads to physically, to the very profound physical freedom that some received that day. We had just intercepted 30 children just before this that had been destined to work in brothels. Young kids as young as 4 years old. What were we going to do with 30 children? We needed help. And here was a destitute mother, very capable destitute mother, with her children, who was now free. We said, would you like to come and stay with us? Would you be happy if we offer you some employment, fair trade wages, a roof over your head that's safe, food in your stomach and for your children, and in return, in your spare time, can you help to feed and bathe, clothe and look after 30 children? She jumped at the chance. Not only was her freedom given to her, but suddenly there was a job, a real job that she could do. And 6 weeks later, she asked the $1 million question: what must I do to be saved? Buddhism has failed me. Buddhism has left me nothing but pain. But I see that Christianity has brought you hope. I see it also brought me freedom. What must I do to be saved? In the most physical and practical way, we've been able to assist this poor lady and her family. But in a spiritual way, we'd opened a door for her to step inside and be wrapped in the grace that Jesus shows us from Calvary. What must I do to be saved? I challenge you the same question. What must you do to be saved? You know, I took this photograph in a refugee camp quite a number of years ago. Some would say it's an outdated photo. It wasn't that old, it was black and white. But I took this a long time ago as a reminder that that little boy who extends his hand and his eyes to me is a reminder that poverty is still there. But he is one. And I've shared with you statistics today that are broad and many. But today I'm challenging you to look at the one. The one, not necessarily the one on the screen, but the one that you can help, or the two, or the three, or the five that you can help. Out the back today on a table, I've got 12 children. We need to get sponsorships. They're desperate. That's why they're there. I didn't just bring along any old kid. And you know the beauty about these children? You can put them on the fridge and they're never late for anything. They're always out of bed on time. You don't have to change their nappy. They always eat their meal. And they're tax deductible, and it's only $43 a month. Way cheaper than your kids. Please help us. I'm going to invite Esther to come and share with you. And don't fall asleep yet. We're not going to be long. Esther, if you'd like to just come up and share. Okay.
I think I'll take that. Good morning, everyone. I was trafficked when I was about 19. I believed that I was going to apply to work as a singer in Japan, but the next minute I had a fake passport and I was traveling with other girls, and on the plane we had to strap ourselves with some contraband to take to Japan. And then one of the people who are in that group was caught, but we were able to get through to the immigration. And once we get to our destination, we were forced to work against our will with prostitution. And you know, some of the girls were locked up, and I managed to run away. And I couldn't really go to the police or immigration because I've had a fake passport and I've done something wrong, and I also had to, you know, save some money so that I can go to school, get educated, and get out of poverty. So eventually, I worked there in karaoke in Japan, but eventually I was rounded up and got deported and went back to the Philippines. So why did this happen to me? This is just typical of some of the girls that have been trafficked. Well, to tell you, I'll tell you a bit about my story. I grew up in a slum area. That picture there, that's we took that photo in my hometown, and that's where I used to grow up. And my parents were spiritualists. They worshiped spirits, and my dad was a quack doctor. But when I was 10, there was an evangelistic crusade in the neighborhood. He was converted to Baptist, and at that time I also received Jesus as my Lord and Savior. But my parents were fighting about religion. It was so crazy. Why would you fight about religion? And they kept on fighting, and eventually when I was 12, they separated. And at that time, we were housed to a thatch house somewhere so that my mom couldn't reach us. And we were 6 children. I was the eldest. I am the eldest, and our youngest at that time was only 2. So I had to look after them, bathe them, cook for them, wash their clothes, and everything. During that time, well, we were physically abused too. Our dad was a strict disciplinarian. He just whipped us and all that. But he also abused me with something more horrible, and I can't tell you what it is, but you know what I mean. As my own dad, how can I, you know, trust man? And I was going to church at that time, and he was also a deacon. And how can I, trust all these people at church? So eventually I just moved out of church, and I didn't really want to believe in that. And when I was 18, I ran away from home, went to Manila because someone recruited me to work in return for schooling. So I had to work as a maid and housekeeper and nanny all at once. I was working really hard, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and just serve them with everything they need. But I realized that they didn't enroll me, so I was really exploited by my employer. And so I didn't like that idea, so I left that employment. And when I left, I was homeless. And that's when I was really getting desperate. And that's when I applied for a job to work in Japan. So many years after that, amazing circumstances happened in my life. I came to Australia, and I was able to, finish my degree. Before that, I forgot to tell you that when I was looking after my brothers and sisters, my dad lost his job, and we were all dispersed. So I didn't have any communication with my brothers and sisters. So that's when I really had to do my best so that I can, I just needed to get out of this poverty. That's what I promised to myself. My goal was to get educated. And so when I was here in Australia, I was able to study at QUT, finish my Bachelor of Business in Accounting, and worked in an accounting firm. And then it was still not enough. I started my own business in bookkeeping, and I've got, I was doing well. I even had my own home, and I've reached my goal. But then again, this emptiness that I felt inside me, I've now reached my goal, but what next? There's something missing in my life. And one day, one of my clients found me in the internet on my website, and I was going to their home office, and I found that their family was really loving and caring, and I just wanted to have something like that. And I found out that they were Christian. So I asked them, can we do Bible study? Because I used to go to church before, but I haven't been for a long time. And that's when I found out that they're Seventh-day Adventist Christian going to Salisbury Church. And I said to myself, whoa, I would never go to church on a Saturday. That would be really, really weird. But then in 2010, I was baptized in Salisbury Church. And that time, I also found out the forgiveness. When I received Jesus again as my Lord and Savior, there is no turning back. I've learned to forgive my dad. All my life, I really hated him. And yes, I've learned to forgive my dad for what he did. And I felt this very big sigh of relief. I felt free, and I felt really good that, if God can forgive me, I should be able to forgive other people who have done something wrong to me. And then I've learned to move on. And so, because of my passion, because of where I come from, when I saw the Icc booth in Big Camp in 2010, that's when I signed up as an ambassador. And I just wanted to, be able to, an advocate of what happened to me, or the kids that are, the things that have happened right now. It's getting worse than ever. So I am here to ask for some help from you. A lot of kids need your help. But first and foremost, I would ask for your prayers. And a lot of things you can help. You can sign up for petition against human trafficking. There's a list there where you can fill up your details, and at the end you can maybe cross a tick there so that we will be able to keep you up to date on what's happening, what are the things that we're doing with ICC. And you can also join as a volunteer. We have a few volunteer trips that are coming up, and we run a few volunteer trips in a year, and one of them is the Thai Big Bill that David mentioned to you earlier. You can also get money box, and you can give it to your children or to your workplace. And there's details there for where to bank it, and also there's a code there where you can write down your name and just write down the code and send it to us later on. And also, as David mentioned, you can sponsor a child. There's 12 of them there out there. They're not just pictures, they're real children, and we really need your help. We really need your help right now to show your love in action. And you can join our mailing list, and also you can like us on Facebook. Please, when you like, you can share it to your Facebook friends. And yeah, that would be really good to for you to share what we do, and so that we can help all these children. Thank you very much.